Now, Clive, we are not going to really talk about your music. The most interesting thing is the book, Following the Melody.
Yeah.
What drove you to writing a book? Normally, artists, musicians are associated with their music and nothing else. But to have a musician going into publishing, what drove you to that?
I think that the culture of not writing stuff amongst musicians, I think it's a Zimbabwean problem. Because if you check in other countries like the United States of America, Europe, every artist, they always write their stories, they write their biographies, they write their memoirs. So I was looking at the Zimbabwean music landscape, and I've noticed that even the legends that went before us, people like Mukadota, people like John Chibadura, James Mombe, they never left any written documentation or even documentaries about how they walked through their journeys, which was going to be something which was going to be very beneficial to the younger generation. So I decided, instead of just complaining, let me just start it, and maybe I will inspire other artists to follow suit.
Yeah, because we have seen a trend where, for example, I'll quickly mention Oliver Mutukudzi is one person who comes to mind. We have had people, Varkunyorama books about him, and he hasn't sat down to write his own story.
Yeah, that's one thing I was afraid it is not going to be, and it has happened already to Mdaro Oliver, and we all know that he was not happy with one of the books, and I think it would be better if you write your own story first, and then if somebody writes his own version, people have got something to refer to.
Right. Now, this book that you have written and launched, Following the Melody, is this book about you and your music journey?
Yeah, it's basically about me and my music journey, the mistakes that I've made, and how those mistakes can be avoided. So it just doesn't basically talk about me. It also touches on a number of issues that happen in the music industry without sugarcoating them. Because there are a number of issues that happen in the music industry, and artists usually we try to hide those things from the general public. So instead of hiding those things, I was bringing those things into the open so that the information can be beneficial to the younger generation and to everybody who is interested in the music industry.
The book is called Following the Melody.
Yeah.
What drove you to come up with such a title? You could have simply just said Mono Mukundu, the musician, or Mono, the guitarist.
Actually, it's my editor who came up with that title. My original title was going to be Chronicles of a Rough Journey, and it's also the name of an album that I released in 2013. So my editor said, no, we need to come up with another name that we have never used before. So after reading the book, after he edited all the other stuff in the book, that when he came up with the name Following the Melody, because he was saying he was sort of like following something. So that's something, let's just call it a melody. So that's how we came up with the name.
Right. In the book, Mono, you mention issues like drug abuse. You also talk about relationships where, for example, your relationship with Maria, who gave you an STD, for example. Now, are you blaming somebody for the things that you ran into?
No, these are some of the issues that face musicians. So it's sort of like a warning to musicians, because as you know, one of the biggest, in fact, the biggest temptation that follows musicians is the temptation of groupies. And groupies are those women that worship musicians. And basically, their trophy is sleeping with musicians. If they sleep with a musician, it's a trophy to them. So that's an issue that's a topic that follows each and every musician. So it's sort of like warning the younger generation or Changopina music industry that you have to be careful of groupies, especially in these days of AIDS and HIV. So that's why I mentioned the issue, because I know it's an issue. But I just said I have to bring out such issues so that they can be beneficial to the reader.
Right. And there are critics, Mono, who have also said that you seem to actually want to be blaming other people for the problems that you ran into. But I just want you to quickly also talk about your person as an individual. Is there a point in the life of a musician where you can actually separate your private and public life? And what is the influence of groupies or other musicians? Because once you are once you become a musician, you move around the same circles.
I think I can't blame anybody for my mistakes, because if groupies are groupies, and there will always be groupies, so they always bring those temptations to musicians. So it's up to you to take it or leave it. And if you take it, it's your fault. You can't blame anybody else. So I can't blame people. I mean, I can't blame anybody for the mistakes that I made. And you asked about separating private life from what? From
your private life from your public life.
That one is a very difficult thing to do, because once you are in the music industry, you are in the public domain, and you don't belong to yourself anymore. You don't belong to your family alone anymore. So everybody wants to know even how many sugars that you put in your cup of tea, how much salt you put in your meat, everything. People need to know everything, and whatever happens to you is a story. So personally, as a musician, I think you've noticed I've tried by all means to stay away from controversy. And as I stated in the book, I ended up being celibate until I got married to my wife, and I'm sure everybody knows how I speak about my wife, how I write songs about her. So I've tried by all means to lead a life very straightforward, it's not controversy. So that press.
Yeah, because the media will definitely do that. But
Yeah.
Mono, your decision then to be celibate, did somebody come to you and talk to you about these things, or it's a decision that you arrived at on your own?
It was after I got that STI. I think I was around 20 or 19, somewhere there. And I noticed the struggles that I went through was trying to cure the, because yakatola time ngorapika ona step inobva yachinja futi kamene chimwe chistep chananda kufamba nacho, so vanhu vamborumwa nemaSTI vanochiza chistep chachicho. So and it was a lot of humiliation, because you'd go to the hospital, manesi okubvunza kuti uri kurwara neende, unongochinyaraka, unongotaurira pasi kuti ndine sick, unzi taurisa, ende mukiune makazara vanhu, wonyadzikwa pane vanhu, unze chipambi chamuri kuita ichi vanhu vemagitare njani njani chicho. So after I got into all that trouble, I thought I'm not going to do it again. And then after about a month or two, I fell into almost the same temptation, and I got another STI. And then after that one, I just decided, you know what, I think I'll have to wait until I get married. So I stuck to my principles. I got, as usual, I got a lot of temptations from groupies, as I mentioned. But I stuck to my principle, to my new principle, and I was celibate until 1993 when I met my wife, and then I got married in 1994.
Right. Now, moving on, Mono, let's talk about also the issues that you mentioned in your book. You talk about getting high for the fun of it. Tell us about that.
I think I mentioned that issue when I talked about the time that we stayed at Nyamanindo Hotel in Mutare. And you know what happens? The music industry in Zimbabwe is a very rough industry. It's a very rough industry, and especially before you make a name for yourself, you go through many struggles. So we went through many struggles. We stayed at Nyamanindo Hotel, and we paid very, very low salary. We couldn't even afford to stay individual, to find individual accommodation. So we were just trying to find something to entertain ourselves. So we ended up beer. And I didn't write it in my book. Of course, I don't know why I skipped it, but I ended up injuring even my pancreas. Really, as we speak right now, pancreas is top because of too much drinking beer. So
Right.
I'm not blaming anybody because of that, but I think I'm just regretting with an I should have written it down with the single pass around drinking beer. To me, it's not bad as long as it's Namaramado, but it needs to be done in moderation.
Right. Before you went into the music, before you started music, had you always been drinking and smoking, Banje?
No, because what happened was I went into music when I was in Form 3, and I never did any other job besides the music industry. So before I went into music, I was just a school kid. So I started music when I was in Form 3, when I was 17, and that time I didn't drink or smoke anything until I finished school. As soon as I finished school, that's when I started drinking and smoking.
You have worked with people like Oliver Mtukudzi. You have worked with Thomas Mafumo. You have worked with people like the
No, Thomas, I didn't work with him, but I just worked with Oliver and the rest.
And Andy Brown.
Andy Brown, we just did some collabs and some. I produced some stuff for him. He was collaborating with other people, and he did a collaboration with me. But I was not part of his band. But we worked together on some collaborations.
Right. Now, having worked in that regard and rubbing shoulders with these legends, we've heard a lot of stories about these legends, good stories actually. Didn't that at some point rub off onto you?
Pardon, what was the question?
I'm saying, having worked with people like Oliver Mtukudzi, for example, what was the influence? How did that impact?
Okay. Yeah. What happens is every artist or every person you work with, you pick something or you learn something. And with Oliver Mtukudzi, I learned a lot about discipline because he's very disciplined on stage and off stage. And I learned a lot about his stage work, how he moves the crowd, how to entertain the people, what we call stage presence, how to entertain the crowd and everything. So I think with everybody that I worked with, I picked up something. And from Chonisto, I learned having good relations with your band members. Because she was very good at having good relations with her band members. She is one person I worked with who was so free, even to allow you to perform your own music on a stage during tours. And I've never met any artist who does that in Zimbabwe. Most artists are very insecure. So I think from every artist I worked with, I picked up something. Even gospel, when I pop out in the put off, but I learned something.
Right. Talking about that particular genre, gospel. Now, there is a belief that if you're doing secular music, it means you will be doing the things that we're talking about, groupies, prostitutes, drugs, etc., etc. Do those things exist in the gospel world?
Yeah, they do. Now, it's the West Poverty. Usually, it's done very much in private. The only difference is that in gospel music, it's done in private, and in secular music, it's done in the open. That's the only difference. But temptations are everywhere, and Maborangoma are everywhere. The artists and instruments are everywhere. So it just depends with how it's done. Like I said, in gospel music, it's done in private. In the secular world, it's done in the open. That's the only difference.
Right. So if somebody were to come up, Mono, and say that there are gospel artists or gospel musicians who are in there just for the money, and they are not true at the word that they spread, how would you react to that?
Yeah, I've worked with gospel musicians. In fact, I was a full-time gospel musician or full-time church musician who was paid by the church for 6 years. So I've worked with such people. And it's not just musicians, even pastors. Because like I mentioned in the book, I had one pastor who was sleeping with all the girls in the band. It's everywhere. At times, those pastors, because usually gospel musicians, they work under pastors. If the pastor is the one who is sort of like the leader, akabva atanga nemagame, everybody follows suit. Like what happened in that band. I think a lot of people in the band, they used to join the group, but they ended up because the pastor was sleeping with all the girls in the band and the girls would fight. Then next thing, my band members vakatanga kungopika pikawo mabhebho futi kumachechi kwatanoparidza ikoko. Saka how could the pastor stop them from doing that when he was the one who was leading the way? So Borangoma chiri kwese.
So your experiences in the gospel sector, would you say that they also then pushed you to move out of that genre and decide on the kind of music that you play nowadays?
Yeah, the gospel, in fact, let me put it this way, I was very disappointed with the gospel music sector because it is not, what I met in the gospel music sector is not what I expected. Because, you know, I had so much respect for the church, I had so much respect for Christianity and everything. But what I found in the gospel music sector really put me off. Like, I was very, very disappointed. Because uchiri fresh uchangotanga kungotendoka wasotanga kusangana nevanhu vari kurwa, vanhu vari kurwa vakadzi. I was drinking my beer, but I was not beating my wife, I was not cheating on my wife, I was not sleeping around, but I also uchingotanga kutendoka wasotanga kushanda nevanhu vari. So I was really disappointed with the gospel music sector, and I also didn't know that when it comes to money and payment issues, the gospel music world was even worse than the secular music world. And even the respect the churches give to musicians, you find musicians are respected far much better in the beer houses and nightclubs than in church. So in the end, I felt like I was not welcome, you see, because even my pastors are in the microphone, so I didn't feel that love. So I ended up questioning a lot of things about the gospel music industry, questioning a lot of things about even Christianity church. End result, I ended up being bitter. I ended up questioning with you. What if they say Jesus can change you, how come even they are not changing? You see? So I ended up questioning even Christianity, even questioning Jesus. How come he's failing to change the people who are preaching him? Then people say, no, zvinoshanda nefree will yako, kana uine free will, ndopa zvinoshanda. Then I was saying, saka hasi Jesu ka, it's my free will. Saka don't say Jesu ane power, because hana power, because vanhu vake vari kuita chibora ngoma. So I started questioning a lot of things about Christianity until even chido chokuenda kuchechi chakabva changopera.
Right. Do you now you have experienced the gospel music genre, and you are now in secular music. If you were going to turn back the hands of time, Mono, would you still go into music?
Yes, very much, because music is my passion, and no one will ever take away that passion from me. So I will still be a musician. I can't do anything else.
Are we going to expect more books from you?
More books? Oh yeah, a lot of books. This one was just the first one. Because the reason why I started with the bio, I thought it would be easier for me to start with a bio. And you know how it is with every time you start something, you start by making mistakes and everything. So I thought it would be easier to make mistakes, you know, about my own bio than making mistakes writing anything else. Because one other thing about me is I struggle with sleep. I've got insomnia, so I spend a lot of time awake during the night. So I've been writing a lot of stuff for years. Because I started writing stuff when I was a teenager. I used to write even short stories and everything. So this was just the beginning. There are more books coming, a lot of books in my hard drive. So this was just the beginning.
Right. And just as a way of rounding up, Mono, can you summarize what Following the Melody is all about? What kind of book, if somebody were to ask you?
It's a book about how I traveled as a musician from the time I started up to the time I opened my own studio. And it points out all the mistakes, most of the mistakes that I made, and how those mistakes can be avoided, and bringing out some of the negative aspects and positive aspects of the music industry, and how new artists can avoid such problems. So basically, that's the book.
Mono, let me take this opportunity to thank you very much for coming along to Capitalk 100.4 FM. Good evening.